The laughter echoed across the dusty town square, sharp as broken glass. Emma Morrison stood frozen, worn boots planted on the cracked planks, 20 pairs of eyes staring at her patched dress and tangled hair. She was the town's punching bag. And today, the punches were landing hard. Jessica Hartwell, the banker's daughter, circled her like a vulture. Her silk blue gown rustled, a sound of money and contempt. "Look what crawled out of the pig pen," Jessica announced, her voice sweet as poison. Her friends giggled, their perfect ringlets bouncing. "Did you forget to wash again, Emma? Or do you always smell like cattle?" Emma's cheeks burned hot, but she kept her chin high. She had bigger problems than Jessica's cruel little games, much bigger. The foreclosure notice in her pocket crinkled, a paper snake, coiled and waiting, 3 days. She had 3 days to find $5,000, or the Morrison ranch was gone, forever. 3 generations of her family had bled into that soil. Now it would all be washed away by a river of ink on a ledger, all because of the debts her father left when his heart gave out 6 months ago. The stress had killed him. Now the debt was trying to kill his legacy. "I heard your daddy left you with nothing but bills," Jessica purred, stepping so close Emma could smell her expensive French perfume. It smelled like fake flowers. "My father says the bank's going to take your little ranch on Friday. Where will you go then?" Jessica paused for effect, letting the whole town lean in. "Maybe you can find work cleaning out horse stalls. You already smell the part." The crowd watched, hungry for the drama. It was better than any traveling circus. Some shook their heads, faking sympathy, but their eyes were wide with morbid curiosity. They wanted to see the poor ranch girl finally break. They wanted to see tears. Emma knew her place in this town. It had been beaten into her since birth. The Hartwells owned the bank, which meant they owned everyone. Then came the railroad families, then the merchants. And way down at the bottom were people like Emma, the dirt-poor ranchers who clung to the edge of town and the edge of survival. Her father had tried to climb. He'd borrowed money, expanded the ranch, bought better cattle. He had a vision. Then the drought came, a long, cruel summer that baked the land and killed half the herd. The crops withered to dust. When her father died, Emma discovered the vision was built on a mountain of debt. "Cat got your tongue?" Jessica taunted. She reached out, her gloved fingers touching Emma's faded brown hair. "This mess looks like you cut it yourself with sheep shears. Did the bank take your mirror too?" That was it. The dam inside her finally cracked. "At least I earned everything I have through honest work." Emma's voice was quiet, but it cut through the giggles like a razor. "Can you say the same?" Jessica's perfect face twisted into a mask of pure fury. "Honest work?" she spat. "You mean rolling around in cow manure? How noble!" She turned to the crowd, her voice rising. "This is what happens when poor people don't know their place. They start thinking they're as good as their betters." The shame was a familiar weight, but today it was crushing. Because this might be the last time. In 3 days, she'd be gone. A hired hand on someone else's land. Her own family's history sold to the highest bidder. The thought made her stomach churn with a cold, hard dread. And that's when she heard it. The sound of horse hooves and wagon wheels. But this was different. It was heavy. Powerful. The crowd turned as one. Even Jessica paused her attack. A magnificent black carriage was rolling down Main Street. It was pulled by 4 perfectly matched black horses, and it was finer than anything this dusty little town had ever seen. The driver wore a crisp uniform. The carriage itself looked like it belonged to a king, with polished brass fittings and curtained windows. It was impossible. "Who do you think it is?" someone whispered. "Never seen a rig like that," another murmured. The carriage didn't slow down. It rolled right into the center of the square and came to a stop, directly in front of them. The world held its breath. The door opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and eyes so blue they seemed to burn. His clothes were perfect, tailored in a way that screamed wealth far beyond anything in this town. Power radiated from him like heat from a forge. Jessica forgot Emma existed. She smoothed her dress, her sweetest, most practiced smile blooming on her face. "Welcome to our little town, sir," she called out, stepping forward with practiced grace. "I'm Jessica Hartwell. My father owns the bank here." The stranger's eyes swept over Jessica for a fraction of a second, dismissing her completely. Then his gaze moved across the crowd. And then it landed on Emma. He stopped. He looked at her, standing there in her patched dress, dirt on her boots, shame on her cheeks, but defiance in her eyes. Something flickered on his face, an unreadable expression. He studied her for a long, silent moment. "Interesting," he said, his voice quiet, carrying a hint of an accent she couldn't place. Jessica's smile wavered. She wasn't used to being ignored. "Perhaps you'd like to visit our bank," she tried again. "Or join us for dinner at our home. We'd love to hear about your travels." The man didn't even look at her. He stepped closer to Emma. The crowd gasped. He was ignoring the banker's daughter. For the dirtiest girl in town. His expensive boots clicked on the wooden planks, each step like a drumbeat counting down to something terrible. Or something wonderful. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. Who was this man? Why was he looking at her like that? Like he could see every secret she'd ever kept. "What's your name?" he asked. His voice was low, serious. "Emma Morrison," she managed to say, her own voice shaking. She was a sparrow next to an eagle. He nodded slowly, as if her name meant something to him. "Morrison. The ranch north of town." He knew. But how? A small smile touched the corners of his mouth. It wasn't cruel like Jessica's, it was calculating. The smile of a man solving a very complex puzzle. The crowd was buzzing. The elegant stranger was talking to the poorest girl in town and treating the banker's daughter like she was invisible. Jessica's face was a storm of red and white, pure humiliation and rage. This was not how her world was supposed to work. Rich men were supposed to fall at her feet. Emma stared into those piercing blue eyes, trying to understand. She had no idea. She had no idea that this man held the power to save her world, or to burn it to the ground. And he was about to make an offer that would detonate in the middle of that town square and change everything. The stranger's next words hit the crowd like a lightning bolt. "You're the one my land needs," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried across the dead silent square. Every jaw in town dropped. Emma blinked, certain she was hearing things. Jessica's face cycled through 3 different shades of purple. I beg your pardon?" Emma stammered. The man reached into his jacket. He pulled out a leather card case and handed her an elegant business card. "Baron Alexander Rothschild," he said with a slight formal bow. "And you, Miss Morrison, are exactly what I have been searching for." Jessica couldn't stand it anymore. She pushed forward, her dress rustling with indignation. "Excuse me, Baron Rothschild," she said, spitting his title like a curse. "Perhaps there's been a mistake. I'm Jessica Hartwell. My family is the most prominent in this town. If you need assistance, I'm sure my father and I would be far more suitable than—" She gestured at Emma's patched dress as if it were a pile of trash. The Baron didn't even glance at her. His eyes were locked on Emma. "No mistake," he said firmly. "I've spent 6 months traveling this territory. Every town, every ranch. I was looking for a very specific combination of knowledge, determination, and character. And I believe I have just found her." Whispers erupted in the crowd. Did he just ignore her again? What could he possibly want with Emma Morrison? He must not know about her debts. Emma looked down at the card. The paper was thick, expensive. Gold lettering caught the sun. Baron Alexander Rothschild. Land Development and Agricultural Investment. There were 2 addresses, one in San Francisco and one in London. "I don't understand," Emma said. "What are you looking for?" The Baron smiled. This time it reached his eyes. "I own 50,000 acres of land about 30 miles north of here. Beautiful country. Rolling hills, good water, fertile soil. But every man I've hired to manage it has failed. Spectacularly." He ticked them off on his fingers. 3 different ranchers have tried and given up. 2 cattle operations went bankrupt. One fellow packed up in the middle of the night, claiming the land was cursed. Jessica let out a small, bitter laugh. Well, if experienced ranchers couldn't make it work, what makes you think a girl with a failing ranch could do any better? The Baron finally turned to look at Jessica. His expression was so cold it could have frozen the sun. "Because, Miss Hartwell," he said, his voice sharp, "I have learned that experience without wisdom is worthless, and money without character is a disease. Your so-called experienced ranchers tried to force that land to be something it's not. They wanted fast profits. That land needs someone who understands you work with it, not against it." He turned back to Emma, his voice warming again. "I watched you. You stood here and took their mockery without flinching. I can see the calluses on your hands. That's the mark of real work. And I can see in your eyes that you know how to fight for something you love." Emma felt dizzy. This was a fever dream. A mysterious baron doesn't just show up and offer you a lifeline. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked. "A challenge," he said, his tone shifting to pure business. "You have 30 days. 30 days to take my land and turn it into a profitable operation. If you succeed, I will pay you $10,000, enough to save your family's ranch and give you a fresh start." The crowd gasped as one. $10,000. It was a king's ransom. It was more than enough. It was a miracle. An impossible, terrifying miracle. "And if I fail?" Emma asked, her voice barely a whisper. The Baron's expression grew serious. Deadly serious. "If you fail, you will work for me. On that land. For 5 years. Without pay. You'll have a roof and food, but you will be bound to my service until your contract is complete." The whispers turned frantic. This wasn't a miracle. It was a trap. A devil's bargain. Success meant salvation. Failure meant 5 years of slavery. "That's ridiculous!" Jessica burst out. "No one could make a profit on cursed land in 30 days. You're asking for the impossible." "Perhaps," the Baron replied calmly, his eyes never leaving Emma's. "But Miss Morrison strikes me as someone who thrives on the impossible." Emma stared at him, her mind racing. What was his real game? Why her? A rich European baron doesn't just gamble on a random ranch girl. There was something more going on here. A piece of the puzzle she couldn't see. "Why me?" she asked, cutting straight to the point. "You've seen me for 10 minutes." The Baron stepped closer. He smelled of expensive cologne and fine leather. "I know you've kept your family's ranch running for 6 months since your father died, with no help and mounting debts. I know you came to town today to find a way to save it, not to gossip. I know you stood up to public humiliation without shedding a tear. And I know you are not afraid of hard work." He paused, studying her face. "But more than all that, I have a feeling about you. Call it intuition. But something tells me you're the kind of person who finds a way to win when losing isn't an option." Her heart was a drum against her ribs. The smart move was to walk away. The safe move was to decline. But she didn't have a safe move left. In 3 days, the bank would take everything anyway. She'd have nothing. This crazy, impossible offer. It was the only chance she had. "What kind of condition is the land in?" she asked, her voice surprisingly steady. "Poor," the Baron admitted without hesitation. "The previous attempts left it in bad shape. Overgrazed pastures, damaged irrigation. But the bones are good. Good soil, good water. It just needs someone who knows how to heal it." "This is insane," Jessica laughed harshly. "Emma, you can't be considering this. It's a cruel joke." But Emma wasn't listening to Jessica anymore. She was thinking about her father. All the lessons he'd taught her about reading the land. About listening to what it needed. Techniques passed down from his father, and his father before him. Methods that focused on health and sustainability, not quick profits. Maybe that's what this land needed. Not a conqueror, but a healer. "I'll need to see the land first," Emma said, her voice growing stronger. "And I need to know what resources I'll have." The Baron's calculating smile returned. "Of course. We can ride out tomorrow morning. But I need your answer by tomorrow evening. I can't wait indefinitely." Emma nodded. her mind already a whirlwind of plans and possibilities. It was a gamble that could cost her 5 years of her life, but it was the only gamble on the table. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the poorest girl in town shook hands with the mysterious wealthy baron. She had just sealed a bargain that would either make her a legend or break her completely. The next morning, Emma's heart sank into her boots. From a small hill overlooking the baron's 50,000 acres, she could see exactly why 3 ranchers had fled. It wasn't a ranch. It was a graveyard. Dead brown grass stretched to the horizon. The creek beds were cracked and dry. Here and there, the white bones of cattle dotted the landscape like grim monuments to failure. The few buildings in the distance looked like they were one stiff breeze away from collapsing into dust. "This is it," Baron Rothschild said quietly, stepping down from the carriage beside her. "Not quite what you were expecting, I imagine." Emma crunched across the brittle grass. The sun was merciless, the heat radiating up from the parched earth. "It looks like a desert," she said. "How long has it been like this?" "The last rancher left 8 months ago," the Baron replied. "It was getting progressively worse for 2 years before that. They all said the same thing, that the land was fighting them, like it didn't want to be tamed." Emma knelt down. She grabbed a handful of dirt. It crumbled into fine powder, bone dry on the surface, but then she dug her fingers in deeper. 1 inch. 2 inches. And she felt it. Moisture. That wasn't right. If the land was truly dead, the soil would be dry as a bone all the way down. Her heart gave a little thump of excitement. This was a clue. She stood up, brushing the dirt from her hands, her mind already working. "I'd like to walk around," she said. "Let's start with the buildings." For the next 3 hours, they explored the property. And with every step, Emma grew more certain. This land wasn't cursed. It had been abused. The buildings were rough, but the foundations were solid. They just needed work. But the real evidence was in the land itself. The previous ranchers had made basic, catastrophic mistakes. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a series of deep furrows running straight down a hillside. They plowed against the slope. The first heavy rain would have washed all the topsoil away. She led him to the main creek. "And they put the cattle pens right here. They contaminated their own water source." The Baron watched her, his expression unreadable but intense. "You think you know what went wrong?" Emma nodded, the puzzle pieces snapping into place in her mind. "They were trying to turn this into farmland. But it's not farmland. It's grazing country. The soil, the water flow, the native grasses. Everything about this place screams cattle ranching." She led him to a small, marshy patch she'd spotted from the hill. A tiny spring bubbled up from the ground, hidden by a cluster of reeds. "And they never found the real water," she said, her voice filled with a dawning excitement. "They were relying on surface water, but this land is full of underground springs. My father taught me how to read the signs, the types of plants, the color of the soil, the feel of the ground under your feet." The Baron raised an eyebrow. "You can find water just by looking at plants?" "Not just looking," Emma said, a real grin spreading across her face for the first time. "By listening. The land tells you everything, if you know its language." She pointed to a cluster of willows 50 yards away. "See those? They only grow where water is close to the surface. And that patch of darker grass over there? That's an underground stream flowing that way." As they walked back to the carriage, Emma's mind was on fire. This wasn't impossible. She could do this. Restore the native grass, tap into the hidden springs, create rotational grazing pastures that would heal the soil. But her hope was a fragile thing. As they reached the main road, a group of men on horseback blocked their path. Emma's stomach tightened. She recognized them. Local ranch hands. And in the lead was John Martinez, a man who'd worked for her father for a month before quitting without a word. "Well, well," Martinez called out, his voice dripping with scorn. "If it isn't Emma Morrison, about to make the biggest mistake of her life." Baron Rothschild stepped forward, his posture instantly protective. "Is there a problem, gentlemen?" Martinez ignored him, his eyes fixed on Emma. "Word's getting around about your little deal. Folks are saying you actually think you can succeed where real men failed." That's none of your business, John, Emma replied, her voice steady. Actually, it is, Martinez sneered. See, some of us were counting on picking up your daddy's ranch for cheap on Friday. But if you're going to be tied up here for the next 5 years, that complicates things. Another man spoke up. We heard you'll need a crew for this little project. Just so you know, ain't nobody in this county gonna work for a little girl who thinks she's better than them. The threat was clear. They were going to make sure she was alone. But before Emma could respond, the Baron's voice cut through the air like a whip. Gentlemen, I suggest you move along. You are trespassing on my property. Martinez laughed. This is a public road, fancy man. We're just having a chat. The chat is over, the Baron said. And there was a new quality to his voice. A cold, hard edge that promised violence. Move, or the sheriff will move you. The men grumbled, but something in the Baron's tone made them uneasy. They turned their horses and rode away, but Martinez yelled back over his shoulder. Good luck finding a crew, Emma. You're gonna need it. The ride back to town was silent. Emma's brief hope was crumbling. She knew how to fix the land. But she couldn't do it alone. Martinez was right. She couldn't restore 50,000 acres by herself in 30 days. Don't let them discourage you, the Baron said quietly. Men like that are all talk. It's not that simple, Emma said, staring out the window. If I can't find workers, my ideas are just ideas. They were almost back in town when another group of riders appeared on the road ahead. Emma's heart sank again. More trouble. But then she recognized the man in the lead. Miguel Santos. An old Mexican man with a face like a weathered map, who had worked alongside her father for 20 years. He'd been like an uncle to her. They'd had to let him go months ago when the money ran out. Emma! Miguel called out, his horse trotting forward. I heard about the challenge. Is it true? Emma nodded, a lump forming in her throat. Miguel's weathered face broke into a huge grin. Your father was a good man, Emma. He taught you well. If you say you can make that land work, then I believe you. Miguel, she started. John Martinez was just here. He said no one would work for me. John Martinez is a fool who thinks the world owes him a living, Miguel said, waving a dismissive hand. But there are others. Men who worked for your father. Men who remember what real ranching looks like. We've been watching fools fail on that land for years, making the same mistakes. He gestured to the men behind him. Emma recognized them. Experienced ranch hands, all of them struggling for steady work. We've been talking, Miguel said. We think it's time someone tried doing things the right way. Not the fast way. Tears pricked Emma's eyes. Miguel, I can't pay you. Not until the 30 days are up. If I fail, you get nothing. Miguel just shrugged. I am an old man, Emma. I would rather work for free for someone I respect than for a fool with money who treats me like dirt. The Baron watched the exchange, his face a perfect poker mask. As they pulled into town, Emma was flying. She had a plan. And now, she had an army. But her hope was a bird about to fly straight into a window pane. Because Jessica Hartwell was waiting for them in front of the hotel. And she was holding a piece of paper. And she was smiling the smile of a predator that has its prey cornered. Emma, darling, Jessica called out, her voice sickly sweet. I have some wonderful news. Daddy and I were so worried about your little adventure. We decided to help you out. Emma's stomach dropped like a stone. When Jessica offered to help, it meant she was about to burn your world down. What kind of help? The Baron asked, his voice carefully neutral. Jessica's smile widened. Well, we discovered some very interesting information about that so-called cursed land. It seems there are some legal complications. She let the words hang in the air. Nothing that can't be resolved, of course, but it might take some time. Possibly more time than you have. The world started to spin. As Jessica held up that piece of paper, Emma knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that it was a death warrant for her last hope. Jessica waved the legal document in the air like a victory flag. It turns out there's been a surveying error, she announced, her voice dripping with fake concern. A significant part of that land, including the main water source, actually belongs to the railroad company. Any work done there without the proper permits could result in, well, criminal charges. Checkmate. Emma felt the air leave her lungs. After all of it, figuring out the land, finding Miguel and his crew, feeling that first flicker of real hope, it was all going to be strangled by paperwork and red tape. A lie, she was sure, but a lie that would take longer than 30 days to unravel. And then, the Baron did something no one expected. He laughed. It wasn't a chuckle. It was a deep, genuine, booming laugh that echoed across the square. Jessica stared at him, her triumphant smile faltering. "Miss Hartwell," the Baron said, stepping forward, his own smile razor-sharp. "I think it's time we cleared up a few misunderstandings." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick folder of his own documents. "First," he said, his voice ringing with authority, "there is no surveying error. I had the entire 50,000-acre property professionally surveyed and legally registered 6 months ago. Every single acre belongs to me, free and clear." He handed a document to Jessica. She stared at it, her face turning pale. "But more importantly," the Baron continued, his voice dropping, becoming so commanding that every single person in the square went silent, "I think you should all know exactly who you're dealing with." He paused, letting the tension build. "My full name is Baron Alexander Rothschild, of the Rothschild Railroad Development Company." A collective gasp swept through the crowd. The Rothschild Railroad. They weren't just some company. They were an empire, carving their way across the entire Western Territory, turning dusty backwaters into boomtowns overnight. Emma stared at him, her mind reeling. "You're with the railroad?" "Miss Morrison," the Baron corrected gently. "For this region, I am the railroad. I've been scouting locations for our next major line, and this valley is perfect for our needs. The question was never if we would build here. The question was how." Jessica looked like she was going to be sick. The man she had insulted, the man whose deal she had tried to sabotage, was the single most powerful man to ever set foot in their town. Her family's future, the entire town's future, rested in his hands. "I don't understand," Emma said slowly, the pieces clicking together in a terrifying new picture. "If you're building a railroad, why do you care about a failing ranch?" The Baron turned to her, his expression suddenly serious. "Because, Miss Morrison, I've learned a hard lesson in my years of work. When we just build, without considering the local communities, we create a scar that never heals. People lose their land, their livelihoods. We create enemies. It's bad for the community, and in the long run, it's bad for business." He gestured vaguely north toward his land. "That property has defeated every man who tried to conquer it. They wanted quick profits. But you, in one morning, you saw what they missed for years. You understand that true sustainable success comes from working with the land, not against it." Emma's mind was spinning. "So this whole challenge, it's not really about ranching, is it?" "No," the Baron replied. "It's about finding someone who thinks long-term. The railroad needs local partners, people who understand the land, and the people. Someone who can help us develop this region in a way that benefits everyone, not just my company." He then looked past Emma, his eyes finding Mr. Hartwell, Jessica's father, who had just arrived and was standing at the edge of the crowd, his face ashen. "For instance," the Baron said, his voice carrying clearly, "I've also been reviewing the local bank records. It's fascinating how many ranches have taken on loans they couldn't possibly repay, only to be foreclosed on by the Hartwell Bank. It's almost as if someone knew the railroad was coming and was trying to buy up all the land for pennies on the dollar before the prices skyrocketed." The crowd began to murmur. They were looking at the Hartwells in a completely new light, not as town leaders, but as predators. "If Miss Morrison can prove her methods work," the Baron announced, his voice booming again, "if she can restore that land using sustainable long-term techniques, I will offer her a permanent partnership. She will oversee all agricultural development along the new rail line for this entire territory, a position that would make her one of the most influential people in the state. Emma felt the ground shift beneath her feet. This was no longer about saving her family's ranch. He was offering her the chance to save the entire community from men like Hartwell. The 30-day challenge still stands, the Baron declared. This is her test. If she can't prove her methods work here, on a grand scale, then she's not ready for the responsibility. Jessica finally found her voice, though it was weak and trembling. This is ridiculous. You can't partner with a girl who can't even pay her own debts. The Baron's cold gaze snapped back to her. Miss Hartwell, your family's bank holds the mortgages on half the ranches in this county. Miss Morrison's ranch is in debt because her father took a risk to improve it. There is a vast difference between an honorable failure and a predatory success. He turned back to Emma. The choice is yours, Miss Morrison. Accept the challenge, knowing the real stakes, or walk away, and I will find someone else. Emma looked around. She saw Miguel's encouraging nod. She saw Jessica's shattered pride. She saw the calculating, expectant look in the Baron's eyes. And in the distance, she could almost feel her father's ranch, 3 days from the auction block. I accept, she said, her voice clear and strong. But I have one condition. Name it. If I succeed, she said, looking not at the Baron, but at the faces of her neighbors in the crowd. You help the other struggling ranchers. You use the railroad's power to give them fair terms, to help them succeed. Don't let this development push them out. A slow, genuine smile spread across the Baron's face. Miss Morrison, he said. That's exactly the kind of thinking I was hoping to find. As they shook hands again, Emma knew her world had just cracked wide open. She wasn't just fighting for a piece of land anymore. She was fighting for the soul of her entire community. And she had 30 days to win. The first 3 weeks were a blur of sweat, dirt, and relentless effort. Under Miguel's expert guidance, their small crew worked from sunup to sundown, and the results were nothing short of miraculous. The land was coming back to life. Green shoots of native grass pushed through the cracked earth. The underground springs Emma had located were now feeding a series of cleverly designed irrigation channels, flowing with clear, clean water. The first small herd of cattle they'd brought in were healthy and gaining weight, thriving on the restored pastures. It felt like they were witnessing a resurrection. But Jessica Hartwell wasn't done. Her public humiliation had festered into a dark, venomous obsession. If she couldn't stop Emma with legal tricks, she would try to destroy her with lies. Emma was directing the crew on a new set of water troughs when she saw the dust cloud on the horizon. A carriage. Jessica's carriage. And it wasn't alone. Several other men on horseback rode with it. Her stomach clenched. She recognized them. Judge Patterson from the county seat, members of the town council, and several well-dressed businessmen, the kind who never left the comfort of their offices. "Emma, darling," Jessica called out as she stepped from the carriage, her voice a weapon wrapped in silk. "I brought some visitors. They were so eager to see your little project." Judge Patterson stepped forward, his face grim. "Miss Morrison, we've received some disturbing reports about your activities here." Emma wiped her dusty hands on her trousers and stood tall. "What kind of reports, Judge?" Jessica's triumphant smile returned. "Well, it seems some people are concerned about your methods. There are rumors you've been cutting corners, using questionable practices to get these unnatural results so quickly." "That's ridiculous," Miguel interrupted, stepping to Emma's side. "Everything done here is honest work, the old way." The judge held up a hand. "We have received sworn statements, affidavits, alleging that Miss Morrison has been using illegal chemical fertilizers, that she may have been poisoning the groundwater to force this rapid growth." The blood drained from Emma's face. This was Jessica's masterstroke. It wasn't just an accusation against her competence. It was an accusation of a crime. One that could land her in jail and ruin her name forever, even if she was innocent. "Those are lies," Emma said, her voice shaking with rage. "Every technique I've used was taught to me by my father. We're restoring natural water flows and reseeding native grasses. There's nothing illegal about it. But she could see the doubt in the businessman's eyes. Jessica's poison was working. With only a week left in the challenge, a lengthy investigation would be a death sentence. Her 30 days would run out while they were testing soil samples. And that's when the Baron appeared. He came riding up on his black stallion, his face a thundercloud. He dismounted in one fluid motion, his cold blue eyes sweeping over the assembly. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice deceptively calm, "what brings you to my property?" Jessica stepped forward, emboldened by her audience. "Baron, we are here to protect your investment. This girl is a fraud. She is using illegal methods to trick you." The Baron's gaze settled on Judge Patterson. "Judge, I assume you have evidence to support these serious accusations?" The judge shifted uncomfortably. "We have sworn statements from concerned citizens." "Let me see them," the Baron said, extending a gloved hand. As the judge fumbled with his papers, Emma realized something. This was bigger than her. This was the moment of decision for the entire region. Would its future be built on honest work and partnership, or on the lies and manipulations of people like the Hartwells? "Your Honor," Emma said, her voice suddenly clear and strong, ringing across the pasture. Everyone turned to look at her. Even Jessica seemed surprised by her tone. "I'd like to make a counter-proposal," Emma announced. "Instead of wasting time investigating accusations made by people who have never set foot on this land, why don't we let the land itself testify?" She spread her arms wide, gesturing to the greening hills around them. "Test the water. Examine the soil. Bring in your own independent experts. Bring in agricultural professors from the state university. Let them verify every single thing we have done here. If they find anything illegal, anything harmful, I will walk away from this deal and accept full responsibility for my actions." A slow smile touched the Baron's lips. "An excellent suggestion, Judge. In fact, I will arrange it myself. I will have the top agricultural experts in the territory here within 3 days. We will settle this, once and for all." Jessica's face went white. She had been counting on the threat of an investigation to cause a delay. She never imagined they would actually call her bluff. Now, her lies were about to be put under a microscope. "Furthermore," the Baron continued, his voice rising, addressing the businessmen directly, "I think it's time this community understood the full scope of what is happening here. Miss Morrison is not just restoring a ranch. She is creating a new model for sustainable development, a model that the Rothschild Company intends to implement across our entire western expansion. Her success or failure here will determine how we approach development for the next 20 years. The businessmen straightened up, their eyes wide. Now they understood. This wasn't about one girl and a piece of land. This was about the future. It was about fortunes. "If Miss Morrison succeeds," the Baron declared, "she will be my full partner in this endeavor. The wealth she generates will flow back into this community. If she fails, or if she is driven off by false accusations, the railroad will find other partners, in other towns." The threat was unmistakable. Emma felt the immense weight of their stares, but she also felt the unshakable strength of her own convictions. The truth was in the soil beneath her feet and the clean water in the streams. In 3 days, the truth would be revealed, and Jessica's web of lies was about to be burned away by the harsh light of day. 3 days later, the town square was a sea of people. It was the same spot where Emma had been humiliated just a month ago, but now it was packed with twice the crowd, all of them buzzing with anticipation, waiting for the verdict. Emma stood in the center, wearing the same patched dress, but she was not the same woman. Her shoulders were straight, her chin was high. Her eyes held the quiet, unshakable confidence of someone who had already won the only battle that mattered, the one against her own fear. Baron Rothschild stood beside her, holding a sealed, official-looking document. Judge Patterson was there, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else on Earth. But it was Jessica Hartwell who everyone was watching. She sat in her family's carriage at the edge of the square, her face pale, her hands clenched in her lap. She looked like a queen waiting for the executioner. "Ladies and gentlemen," Judge Patterson announced, his voice straining, We have received the official report from the independent agricultural experts who examined Miss Morrison's work on the Baron's property. A hush fell over the crowd. Emma could hear her own heart pounding. The experts, the judge continued, reading from the paper, have found Miss Morrison's methods to be not only completely legal, but revolutionary. A small cheer went up from Miguel and his crew, standing proudly at the front. They report that the land has been restored, using traditional, sustainable ranching techniques that have been proven to dramatically improve soil quality and water purity over time. Furthermore, the judge's voice cracked slightly, they state that Miss Morrison's approach is so effective, it should serve as a model for agricultural development throughout the entire territory. The Baron stepped forward, and his voice boomed across the square. Miss Morrison has not only met the challenge I set for her, he declared. She has exceeded it in every possible way. The land that 3 experienced ranchers abandoned as worthless is now on track to be profitable, healthy, and sustainable for generations to come. He turned to face Emma, and his smile was no longer calculating. It was filled with genuine, profound respect. Miss Morrison, I hereby formally offer you a full partnership in the Rothschild Railroad Development Company. You will oversee all sustainable agricultural development for our entire western expansion. Your starting salary will be $50,000 per year, plus a percentage of all profits from the associated land development projects. The crowd exploded. $50,000. It was a staggering sum, more money than anyone in that town could even imagine. Emma Morrison, the poor, humiliated ranch girl, was now one of the wealthiest and most powerful people in the territory. But her response stunned them all into silence again. I accept your partnership, Baron Rothschild, she said, her voice clear and strong. But only on the condition we established before, that our first act is to create a cooperative program, a program that uses the railroad's resources to help all the struggling ranchers in this region get back on their feet. She looked out at the crowd. Success shouldn't belong to just one person. It should lift up the entire community. The Baron's smile widened. Miss Morrison, that is precisely why you are the right partner. As the crowd roared its approval, Emma looked at the faces around her. The same people who had watched her humiliation were now celebrating her as a hero. Her gaze fell on Jessica. The banker's daughter was staring at her, not with hate, but with a look of stunned, bewildered awe. For the first time, Jessica looked like she was questioning everything she had ever believed. Miguel pushed through the crowd, his weathered face beaming. Your father would be so proud, Emma. Tears finally pricked her eyes. We did something amazing, Miguel, she corrected him. None of this was possible without you. 1 year later, Emma stood in the same town square, but it was a different town. The new railroad station bustled with activity. New businesses lined the street. Prosperity had come to the valley. The Morrison Ranch was saved. More than saved. It was now the thriving headquarters for the most successful agricultural cooperative in the territory. A program that had lifted dozens of families from the brink of foreclosure to success. A woman walked up to her. She wore practical work clothes, not silk. It was Jessica Hartwell. In a move that shocked everyone, she had been the first to apply to join Emma's cooperative, claiming she wanted to learn what real work felt like. And to everyone's surprise, she had worked harder than anyone. Emma, Jessica said quietly, I owe you an apology. And more than that, I owe you my thanks. You showed me there's more to life than what you're given. Emma smiled and extended a calloused hand. There's a place for anyone willing to work hard and treat people with respect. As they shook hands, Emma reflected on the impossible journey. They had mocked the girl in the patched dress and muddy boots. Now, that same woman stood as a leader, still in her work clothes, because they were no longer a symbol of poverty, but a badge of honor. They represented honest effort, real accomplishment, and a victory that wasn't just about proving her enemies wrong, but about proving to herself and her community what was possible. If you believe in the power of second chances, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for more stories that prove the impossible is just waiting to be done.